Once more, good evening and welcome to our cloud computing session with Tidemi, where we are going to focus on AWS again for today's presentation. So today we are going to continue on where we left it when we're talking about VPC. And in the previous video, if I have to do a revision, you notice that we created our first ever VPC in the cloud. And after that, we, created also some VPC components like subnet, routables, internet gateways, NACL's security group. So today we are going to actually continue from where we left it, and our focus for today will be, to have a detailed understanding on the two most important firewalls that can be found under our VPC dashboard, known as NACL, that's the Network Access Control List, and Security Group. So before we actually dive into, you know, deploying or, configuring the various firewall, let's have a brief explanation on what NACL is. So the Network Access Control List is basically there to protect subnet, as I said. Okay, it's a stateless type of firewall. Now, firewall can be, we have hardware firewall that are physical, you can see, and also we have virtual or software firewalls. Like in our case here, we are talking about the NACL, which is Network Access Control List. Okay, it protects the subnet, so it's a subnet level firewall. So it works based on rule that basically allow and deny. So your NACL, you can either allow a particular traffic or you can deny a traffic. As I said, traffic are basically signals, generated by, users over the internet, over the network going to your server. Okay. So we are going to see, or we are going to, yeah, we are going to see how traffic can be generated and how you can control. But you should know that NACL, it's a role-based firewall that either allow or deny. Now, when you create your AWS account, as I said, each region comes with a default VPC and it comes with some default VPC components like NACL, subnet, and all the rest. As you can see here, so default NACL allow all traffic. So if you notice when you go to your account, which I'm going to show you, the default network access controllers that came with your default VPC allow all traffic by default. So even if you don't modify it, once you launch anything in that particular VPC, the default VPC, the NACL will allow all the traffic going to the various subnets. So when we are talking about NACLs, we have specific IP addresses and port numbers. Okay, now socket is a combination of an IP address and a port number. So in networking, when we say something is a socket or we say a socket is made up of the combination of an IP address and a port number. Okay, can be what restricted using NACL. So these are some of the characteristics of NACL. Okay, you can allow, you can deny, you can also restrict access from a particular socket. That's a combination of IP address and port numbers. Now, IP addresses are logical address that are used to identify devices over a network, while port numbers are there to identify applications over the internet or over still a network, because the internet is also a network. Now, rules are evaluated in numbers. Now, when it comes to NACL, rules are evaluated in numbers. Okay, so when you're creating or when you want to allow or want to deny traffic using NACL, you have to number them. Okay, you number them accordingly, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Basic, most especially we use 10, 20, 30, and the rest. And lastly, on NACL, you should know that both inbound and outbound rules are modified. That simply means after you must have created your NACL, both the inbound and the outbound rule, which I showed you on our previous video, must be modified. Okay, you need to edit them and all the rest. So let's dive back, or let's go back to our management console. So this is my management console. You see, I've logged in. I'm in my favorite region, North Virginia. Okay, if we click, if you want to, if it doesn't take you to your VPC, okay, you can basically search. As I told you, you search here. So when you get to your VPC dashboard, if I click on VPCs, you'll see this is the default VPC and this is the VPC we created the last time. Okay, and some of its metadata. If you notice, now these are the two subnets we created, one public, one private. We created two routable, one public, one private. We created an internet gateway which is attached to our VPC. Then we created a NACL, and that's two NACL, one for public, one for private, and same thing for security group too. So our focus today will be on NACL. So let's click on NACL. Now remember, when you create your NACL, both public and private, as I said, I recommend you to do what? Don't use one NACL for both the public and the private subnet. Okay, have two or more. Now after you must have created your NACL, the public NACL is attached or is associated to your public subnet, and the private NACL is associated to the private subnet, as you can see. Now the next thing you need to do after you must have done that is to modify the inbound or the outbound rule. Now basically inbound rule are traffic going into your server. Okay, let's say for example you have Facebook, you are the owner of facebook.com. Now inbound are basically traffic leaving from Facebook users like you and I when we are searching or we want to access Facebook. So that process is called inbound communication, and when Facebook server replies back to us, it is called the outbound communication. So that is basically the difference between inbound and outbound. So when it comes to NACL, you must configure both inbound and outbound. Remember, when you create your NACL by yourself, everything else is denied, is blocked. But if you want to use the default one created by AWS, if you notice, everything is allowed. So take note, don't be confused. So let's just start with our public. Before you actually start enabling or editing the inbound and the outbound rule for your NACL, you need to know exactly what type of traffic you want to allow. Okay, if you're a network engineer or you're not a network engineer, you need to contact your network engineers based on how your application or how your infrastructure is. You need to know which traffic you want to allow. There are so many traffic out there. We have the HTTP traffic to access the web, we have SSH for remote, we have RDP. Okay, there are database traffic. Okay, different applications out there and different services all over the internet have different traffic. Okay, presently I'm using the HTTPS traffic to access our AWS management console. As you can see here, that is it. HTTPS, the secure version of HTTP, which stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So most of the applications out there or services have, they generate traffic and they work with a particular protocol. Now when we say we edit inbound, for example, when I click inbound now, before we proceed, everything you do, the outbound is a replica of the inbound. Okay, whenever you configure the inbound of a NACL, you just need to replicate the same thing on the outbound. If not, it's not going to work. Just have that basic excuse me, just have that basic knowledge for now. If you are to configure 10 role on your inbound, you need to replicate the same 10 role on your outbound, and you need to respect the order. Remember we said something here, okay, that NACL works or what? Rules are evaluated in numbers. Okay, so you need to respect. So if the first rule under inbound is 10, just know that you need to replicate the same thing under outbound. So when you click on inbound, you click edit inbound rule. Let's just say for now we want to allow HTTP traffic, HTTPS, uh, let's say SSH to remotely access Linux instances, RDP to remotely access Windows EC2 instances, and let's say to test connectivity ping. So when you click inbound, you need to do what? You need to click on add new rules. Now you need to number your rules. As I said, I love numbering my rule from 1. So when you click 1, yeah, you need to search the type. What type of traffic? As I said, traffic are being determined by what? Protocols. Okay, and each protocol has a port number attached to it. These are different protocols. Protocols are basically rules and regulation governing data communication. You and I can communicate over a network because of a certain protocol. You can access Facebook, you can access any application over a network because of a certain protocol. So these are different protocols that you need to understand, you need to master, and otherwise. Okay, in our master class, one-on-one master class, we're going to explain this in detail to our student. So when we get here, let's say for example we want to allow HTTP, which is basically used to access the web. So we click that, automatically, okay, the protocol appears. The port range is port 80. As I said, protocols work with port numbers. Okay, and there are 65,000 port numbers in total, but you don't need to master all the 65. Okay, Now, what is the source? The source is from the internet. Now, this is a public NACL. So that is why I will allow source from anywhere. When it gets to the private, it's different because the private does not communicate with everyone. So you need to be specific when it comes to the source of a private NACL. But for the public, we always just put source anywhere. Then we either allow or deny. So you can deny. So you can decide today that you want to block a particular application. Okay, or you want to block a particular port. You want to, you see there are different ports here. You can decide today that I want to block all my SQL database traffic. I just put here and I click on what, deny. But now we want to allow, so we go to allow. I'm going to add a second rule with 20. I will say HTTPS for secure communication. The same thing. We add the third rule 30. Let's say SSH. Yeah, because we're going to use it to remotely access our EC2 instance. We do the same for Windows EC2 RDP. Then we are going to add the ICMP, which is basically used to test connectivity. We use this particular traffic or protocol to know if a particular computer over a network sorry is accessible. And last on our list, which I always love to add, is all ICMP, all TCP. Now, this particular protocol is, it has some hidden protocol that helps facilitate communication over the network, which you will not know as a newbie, but as I said, when you get to the advanced stage, you're going to understand how useful the all TCP is. But our focus for today is just to know how to modify the inbound role of a NACL, and most especially the public. So take note, when we get to the private, you'll notice it is different. So you should need to take note of the order, okay, because you need to replicate this same thing when you get to the outbound, okay. So you can just take a photo of it if you know you cannot, you know, if you cannot remember everything. So I'm just going to take a photo of it because I need to replicate the same thing, and I save changes. So after you save, after you must have saved, you need to go to outbound. You click on edit outbound. You need to repeat the same thing. Okay, when you get to the outbound, you don't need to think anything. All you need to do is you replicate the same thing that you did in the inbound, and you need to follow the order, because if you don't follow the order, then there will be a problem. Okay, traffic will be blocked, and communication will be, disorder, and things will not flow successfully. So take note of that. So I'm just going to repeat the same thing since I have in mind my IP addresses, all ICMP version 4. Remember, IP addresses are of two versions, so for now we focus on, version 4, all TCP, and that is it, and we save changes. So that is basically how you edit your NACL inbound and outbound rule. For the protocols, for the traffic, it's all left on you to decide which traffic you want to allow or not. And AWS list privileges state that you allow only the traffic that you need. Don't allow everything. Okay, allow all what is needed. And take note, when you edit inbound, you need to edit outbound for NACL. No, so that is the public. So for the private, as I said, now we don't need anything for the private for now. Okay, when we start launching, things in our private subnet, you need to, come and do the same thing here. You come under private, you click edit, you allow only the traffic needed. Now, when you allow a particular traffic, for example, private, let's say we want to allow uh since private, most of the time in the cloud, our private subnet hosts our databases and the rest. So we'll mostly be allowing database communication. Okay. So when you click, for example, a database traffic, now the source should not be from anywhere, because private NACLs or private subnet does not communicate direct to the internet. So most of the time here, the source should be the CIDR of an internal VPC, or the source should be the side of a particular network that you want it to access your private subnet, because not everyone has the possibility, or not everyone should have access to your private subnet. So when you're modifying the knuckles, or you're modifying firewalls for private subnet, it can be firewall, it can be security group, please make sure for the source you allow only the network that is supposed to have access, by putting what, the CIDR block, the network address here, and you can as well block the others. But now you don't need to waste your time blocking. Okay, because anything not allowed is automatically what blocked. Yeah, any traffic not allowed is automatically blocked. So you don't need to manually block the other ones. Just allow what you want to allow. Then what is not allowed will be denied automatically. So I'm going to cancel this. So that's basically how NACL is important, how it can be configured after creating, you associate, you edit the inbound and outbound role. Yes, and as you keep practicing, you're going to understand, you're going to be versed with the protocols, with the traffic and other rest. So that is what I have for you today for NACL. Stay tuned while I take you to the next video where we'll be talking on the next and one of the most important firewall core security group. Thank you and bye for now.